Welcome back to another video. It's still grey, it's still wet, and it's still a little bit bland out there for those landscape photos. So instead, we're going to dive back into Lightroom Classic. It's Tutorial Tuesday. Welcome back to Tutorial Tuesday, where each week and every Tuesday, we bring you a brand new, fresh photography tutorial. This week, we are going to dive into Lightroom Classic, and we're going to take a look at one of what I think is one of the most powerful masks that you can use for skies in particular, but this works for all kinds of different things. But this is essentially going to give you the tools that you need to get a very dramatic and interesting looking sky in your photo. And using this mask can really give you the effect of a little bit like a polarizing filter on your sky. It can look fantastic, making those clouds really pop, making the sky very rich, very interesting, and it can add a lot to your landscape photos. Just before we dive in though, this episode of Tutorial Tuesday is not exactly sponsored by Lexar, but they very, very kindly, as we mentioned last week as well, lent me the Lexar Professional Workflow docking bay. Now, this is a 6-bay docking bay where I have got it set up in what is the ideal way for me. I've got lots of different card input options in there, which is great because I use all kinds of different cameras with my job. So it's very, very useful to be able to just pop all the different types of cards straight in and just have them connected straight to my computer. But you can customize this with how you actually set it up. I've also got a 2TB portable SSD in there, which is great for being able to take out and about if I want to as well on a shoot, and actually connect it up to a laptop and then just have it slotted back in here. Super, super easy to just work with. I can also charge my camera, my microphone, my phone, really anything I want from the docking station. It just makes everything post-production super, super easy to manage, and I don't have to kind of fiddle about with different wires and different inputs and really worry about that kind of stuff. It's all managed through this station. So I wanted to give a little shout out to Lexar there. Like I say, it's not exactly sponsored, but it's been super, super helpful, especially with Tutorial Tuesday as well. Now, let's dive into Lightroom Classic and let's take a look at this mask. Right, let's take a look at this mask that I've been using a lot recently for skies. So let's dive into the masking panel. We're going to look at a couple of different photos so you can get a sense for exactly how useful this can be. And the actual mask we're going to use is in the range section down here, and it's color range. Now, there's a couple of different ways we can use this. We can use the eyedropper tool here. You see it just automatically comes up now for us to pick a color. But rather than just pick a color, I'm actually going to click and hold and drag out a little square, and that's going to allow us to take an average color from that, which is really useful. It just makes it much, much more useful. As you can see, it really picks out the blue in the sky, and we already have that now available to us, which means that we can now do things like bring just the exposure of the sky down, the actual blue of the sky, maybe suck out some of the saturation if you want to go in that route. Let's leave the saturation where it is for now, but I could bring down the black level, for example, and I can also come down and just raise the dehaze. Now, that's great. That looks really interesting, but there's a couple of other things we can do with this. First up, we could actually come in, create another mask, come down to color range, and what I'm going to do now is select a square over things like the cloud and actually boost the exposure of that a little bit, boost the whites as well, just to really make that a little bit more, so the clouds are popping against that darker sky. Now that can also look really good as well. Let's come back to mask 1 though, and actually right click and intersect mask with linear gradient. Now we can bring this down something like this. And now those masks are only, when they interact with each other, they're only applying to the photo. So when we have mask 1 selected and we press O, you can see that the mask is both a combination of that linear gradient and only applying on that blue sky. That makes it much more visually interesting than it was before. If we actually do a before and after, so just pressing backslash on the keyboard, this is what it looked like before, this is what it looks like now. A little bit more poppy in that sky, which I think is really cool. We could even go in a little bit further with another mask, actually create a new mask, and in this case, we could go ahead and select objects. And actually now this gives us a brush tool. We can actually brush a pretty rough brush over this building, just the outline of it. I'll just fill in a little bit of the internal part, and we'll let Lightroom work out exactly what it is I'm actually trying to mask. So Lightroom's done that. There we go. That looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and bump the exposure up of that, little bit of contrast, and maybe come down for a little bit of clarity as well, which is just down here. There we go. So that looks pretty good. If I come back to the global settings, let's do it before and after. This is where we started. this is where we got to. A little bit more contrast, a little bit more visually interesting and quite impactful as a popping photo. Let's go over to this photo now, where I think that combination of a linear gradient mask with the color range mask is going to really help bring the most out of this sky. So let's go ahead and actually go over to the masking panel. Let's go range, color range. And again, we're going to go ahead and pick a square over this sort of blue here. Now, this is interesting because it's selected a lot more of the photo. So this time, we're going to use this refine slider here, and we can bring that up or down to actually address how much of the color is being selected. So I'm going to bring it down to something like that. I think that looks pretty good. And then actually what we could do is right-click now, intersect mask with, we can go linear gradient, and then we can just bring that down from the top. So something like that. Now that is going to create an interesting mask that when we start to adjust it, you can see immediately that is so visually interesting in the way it's affecting the photo. I'm going to bring the blacks levels down. I brought the contrast up, the exposure down, and I'm going to come down here and just boost the dehaze as well. Immediately, that's a much more interesting sky. Let's create another new mask here. Again, we'll go color range. This time, I'm going to pick a bunch of the cloud. Now, again, let's come up. Let's refine that. Let's do something like this. And just to make this a little bit more straightforward, a little bit easier to make sure we are just getting those clouds, we can right click on this one, intersect mask with, select sky. So now we are just getting that color in the sky. Super, super handy. So we can bring the exposure up of that a little bit, bring the whites up, and look at that. That is popping so much more. Now, if we press the backslash key now, you can see this is what it looked like before. You can see I've made a little adjustment there to the angle of the photo as well, but this is what it looks like now. So that sky is so much more visually interesting, and we have full control of going back in. So for example, if we open the masking panel again, let's go mask 1, we can actually select that linear gradient. We could actually bring that down more. You can see in real time, you can see it changing, or we can bring it up more if we want to have a less of an effect of a little bit less of the sky. Right, so I think that looks really, really good. Let's go for one more photo. So we've got this one here. We're going to do a very similar kind of effect here, make that sky a little bit more interesting and pop a little bit more. Let's go ahead for a color range mask. Again, we're going to select the blue in the sky here. Let's refine that. So we get, there we go. That looks really good. And now let's bring that exposure down a little bit, the contrast up, the black level down, and maybe the dehaze just a touch. We don't go too crazy. All these photos are JPEGs as well, so they're holding up really well here, which is great. Now again, we could go ahead and intersect that mask with a linear gradient. Let's do that, and then just draw that linear gradient on something like that. Okay, that looks really good. If we wanted to, we could make that quite a soft gradient, and we could actually come in and actually really bring that down in terms of the exposure, make it a much more intense edit, but with a much softer gradient there across the photo. I think that actually looked quite cool. So there's a few different ways we can really affect this, right? And we have full control over changing that afterwards. Let's do color range again for the clouds, which we can go ahead. There we go. Refine that down a little bit. Let's right click, intersect mask with, select sky, just to make that a little bit easier to just make sure it's just affecting the part of the photo that we want. And then we can bring that exposure up. Bring that white level up, make that pop a little bit more. And then we can turn off all of these masks. Let's do something like that. So we can turn off all the masks. That's what it looked like before. That's what it looks like now. So it really just helps that sky to pop. Absolutely makes the photo, I think, makes it a much more visually interesting photo, especially on a very bright day like this, where maybe you want the effect or something that looks a little bit like having a polarizing filter, but maybe you don't have a polarizing filter with you. I didn't here, but it can still get that kind of effect with the sky, which is fantastic. I really, really like the look of that. And I think it makes, like I said, the whole photo just more visually interesting, draw the viewer in a little bit more. Now, these photos were all taken on the Fujifilm X-E5. You can check out that camera and all of the kit we use for all of these videos over at parcameras.com. There'll be links down in the description so you can go check that all out for yourself. Don't forget to like, subscribe as well, because there's new content all the time. I will, of course, see you in the next video. But until then, as always, thanks for watching.